In life, we all encounter obstacles, and those obstacles come in all different shapes, sizes, and forms. The question is, how do we handle those obstacles? Do we attack them head on, or do we allow them to make us quit? Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast, where we aim to motivate and inspire listeners to never give up on themselves, their dreams, or their goals. We will interview successful people from all walks of life as they share their no-quit stories when they had the choice to give up or give in, but they didn't. We thank you for listening, and we hope to be that jolt of positivity as you go for your greatness. Welcome to episode number 123 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is abundance. Our quote of the day comes to us from Gabriel Bernstein. True abundance isn't based upon our net worth. It's based on our self-worth. I'm really excited to bring you today's episode. Although I only met this gentleman recently via an introduction from a very good friend, we have quickly become friends. He is all about living an abundant life and helping others become great themselves. Nathan Jamail is an incredible gentleman that is full of life and spirit. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Nathan, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Thanks, Chris.
Appreciate you being here. So the first question we ask everybody is, are you ready to bring it today?
I'm always ready to bring it.
Good answer. So the number one objective of our show is to both motivate and inspire our listeners to never give up. And I was curious if you had either a personal story about perseverance or perhaps a challenging time that tested you, but you kept on going and didn't quit.
You know, Chris, I probably have several, but I will tell you, I'm the guy that I'm like the most blessed human being you met. Everything works out for me. So many times when I feel the no quit or I need to push through, I just know it's something better is on the other end. But the best one I'll tell you is when I got in this business, when I left corporate America, and my wife and I we moved from California, Texas in 2005. And then we started our own business. We had a mortgage company. We started an art studios for her, and I just started this speaking business. And long story short, fast forward December 2007, and January 2008, and I'm going to the wife and I said, "Hey, babe, we're out of money." The new book was getting ready to come out, or just come out, if I remember correctly. And I went to my wife and I said, "You know, we spent all our life savings, 401k we cashed out, the money we made from house selling, everything we had." I said, it's time to either decide what we want to do. But we can't, we're at the point now where next month's mortgage payment is going to be a problem. And we can sell the fancy cars in the house and move an apartment and keep going, or I can go get a corporate job. And she said, look me dead in the eyes, man. And she says, Nathan, I was born poor. I was raised poor. I'm not scared of poor. You say living the dream all the time, then we keep chasing our dream. And that was our no-quit moment. And fortunately, I had my wife to really help me with that no-quit moment. And literally within 30 days, one thing happened, a new client, a first client, my pastor helped us out with the client, and the book came out, and it just started going. And here we are 10 years later, living the dream and waiting for book number 5 to be released in October. So that's my no-quit story with the help of a wonderful bride.
That's a great story, and I think it's so true that it doesn't matter where you are in life, where you're starting or whether you're about to start something, is the people that are in your corner and on your bus are so important, and that's something that we often talk about on our show. So I'm glad you had that supportive wife in your corner, because that's important. And reality is, a lot of people in your situation, that spouse might not have said, I'm all in. So obviously you guys both made a good decision, because as you said, 10 years later, you were absolutely rocking it with your business. So I wanted to ask you, Nathan, real quick, if you could just tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and what exactly you do, in addition to being a very successful author and speaker. Maybe you could tell a little bit about what it is that you actually do within that field.
Sure. So first of all, I'm married to a wonderful lady, Shannon, and I have 4 children, 22, 16, 8, and 6. I get art before my youngest goes into middle school, and I'm going to be a grandfather this July. So if that's not crazy enough. But what I do, man, is I basically work with leaders and organizations on how to create thriving cultures. I believe it's right. Someone's a good employee, and we promote them to manager. But we say, hey, I want you to coach your employees, but we never teach leaders how to coach their employees. At the same time, as organizational leaders, man, we're trying to get our people in alignment. We want our people to care as much about the business as we do. And I've found that number one reason that companies and organizations struggle with leadership, coaching, alignment, and success is because the mindset and the disciplines from the top leader to the frontline employee. So, man, I work with organizations on how to make great leaders great coaches and how to make great employees great employees. And that thriving culture, I'm a big believer you got to love what you do. And I get a lot of flack for it. Everybody says you can't always love what you do. I said, I love being married. That doesn't mean always being married is always easy. But you got to love what you do so much that you will do the hard stuff. You got to have a purpose. And so I help people and organizations develop others to achieve that purpose and them themselves as leaders achieve that purpose. That's it. That's all I do for a living.
Sounds incredibly simple, but I know there's a lot that goes into it. And I think the word culture is something that we often talk about on our show and why it's so important for teams, companies, organizations, and especially startups to have that culture. So I'm glad you touched on that. I wanted to ask you, Nathan, how do you personally define success?
How do I define success?
Yes.
I will tell you, pretty simple. I find success is when we are grateful for what we have and never stop desiring to want more. When we are content with who we are and what we do, but we're not complacent in where we are. And so, I always tell my children and my 16-year-old, you can have anything. And so I think when you get up in the morning and you feel good about you, you go to work and you come home from work and you still feel good about you. I would tell you the way I know that I am successful and on my right path is, Chris, if I won the lottery, I would do nothing different tomorrow other than do more of what I'm doing. And I think that's success. I think when you wake up and you love who you are, you love who you're with, and you love what you do. And by the way, when you do that, money comes in more than you know what to do with it. And so I think that's success.
I love that. I think if you mentioned if you hit the lottery, you'd still be doing what you're doing. I think that's great. And I know a lot of people, unfortunately, wouldn't do that. So I commend you for that. But that's the beauty of doing what it is you actually want to do. And obviously, you started off, as you mentioned earlier, in the corporate world, and you switched over and made this transition. So hopefully for our listeners that are out there, they realize that there are other things to do. And that's not saying you have to be an entrepreneur or do your own thing. But it is possible that you put your mind to something and you have to put the work in. But I'm glad you touched on that. One of the things we ask each of our guests is if you had to define yourself, Nathan, in only one word, what would that word be?
Simple. Simple. Man, I believe that I'm a simple person. I believe success is not complicated. I believe life and love is not complicated. I believe being a good father isn't complicated. I think it's simple. Just don't confuse simple and easy. It's not easy. I've never been the sharpest knife in the drawer or the smartest person in the room, but I'm convinced there's no one who will outwork me. And I try to remain confident and humble in the sense that I believe in me. I also believe that I'm never too good to do anything. And so, but Chris, I do want to touch on something too that you were talking about a minute ago. I love what I do, and if I won the lottery, I'd still do it. But I gotta tell you, man, I spent 10 years at Sprint. I loved every minute of it. I owned a mortgage company. I loved it. I worked in retail, and I loved it. And I think the reason I've always loved what I do isn't because of the widgets or whether it's phones, pagers, or encyclopedias. I think it was the fact that I was constantly getting better, growing, and having fun. I mean, that or I've been really blessed by having great people and great jobs. But I've been real lucky that I've loved every one of my jobs I've had, except I was a janitor once. I did not love that.
I've never been a janitor, but I'll take your word for that. You touched on something that was interesting, and I think the reason you mentioned the love you had for your jobs, both currently as well as your past ones, especially with Sprint and the mortgage company, is because you touched on the fact that you were constantly growing and learning. I think that's something that people often don't do is they get stagnant in their place of work or in their position, and that's when it becomes the 9 to 5 and you end up dreading it as opposed to enjoying coming to work. So I'm glad you touched on that because I think it's something interesting. And you also touched on something which is a hot topic that I've actually spoken about on stage a couple times, is the concept of simple versus easy. And most of our listeners probably have heard me speak about Mel Robbins and the 5-second rule, where she specifically talks about simple versus easy. It's simple to lose weight, in the sense of it's simple that you know what you need to do. You need to eat less. You need to exercise more. And it's not easy, though. It's simple conceptually, but it's not easy to do. So I'm glad you touched on that, because most of the stuff that we talk about, it is simple to understand. It is simple to put a plan together. It is simple to speak to that trainer or to speak to that coach. But what it is on the other side is it's not easy to do it. It takes effort and it takes commitment, but conceptually it's simple. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, and to your point, it's kind of like your no quit thing. I love no quit, and I believe that you will overcome any obstacle as long as the reward is worth your sacrifice, right? And so when you emotionally have that reward, or you want it so bad that you're willing to do the simple things that you don't want to do, like lose weight or whatever it may be, or in the 5-second rule, it starts by getting out of bed, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I love the book. But it's interesting that success, you mentioned that I was learning. I just did a piece for Cisco on invest in your R&D. And I talk about companies invest in their R&D, millions and millions of dollars in research and development to make sure they're relevant and strong to their customers. They have a competitive advantage against their competition. They have to constantly reinvent and reinvest in whatever product or service they provide. Yet people, I always ask, what's your R&D? What are you investing in you to stay relevant, to stay ahead of the game, to increase your value to those who employ you or pay you? And, I see people out there all the time who don't read books, don't go to workshops, and they're, to your point, it's really easy to become complacent when you're no longer learning. And I challenge people to say, listen, if you spend 4 years in college learning something you're probably not even using today, 12 years going to school for most stuff you're not even using today, what have you done since you graduated college? And if you haven't invested in your financial knowledge or your spiritual knowledge or your whatever type of knowledge that will make you a better leader, a better person, you're missing the boat. And when you do that, you'll become more motivated, I think more content versus complacent.
Speaking of complacency,
that's my thoughts.
No, that's a good point. And speaking of complacency, I was curious if you've read something recently, or perhaps you have a favorite book you'd like to recommend to our listeners.
Well, I will tell you, all my books are my favorite. My favorite author is Nathan Jamail. Just a very, very nice guy. I know him personally. But I will tell you, a couple of my favorite books that are some old classics I literally was listening to before I came here to see you is Think and Grow Rich. I've probably listened to it 5 or 6 times. I do a lot of audio books because I'm in the car a lot. So Think and Grow Rich, I just was listening to. And before that, I was doing The Attractor Factor, which is a great book. I mean, there's so many good books out there, man. How to Win Friends. I love some of the old classics, How to Win Friends and Influence People. There's a lot of new ones out there that are great. H3 is a good book. My book's coming out, by the way. I will tell you, it took me 3 years to get this kind of concept up and running for me. I've been dealing with it a long time. Serve up, coach down. And any type of book when it comes to how do we get better as a person, how do we become more genuine, more in alignment with abundance, I'm a big fan of.
No, I love it. And abundance is a word that we often touch on in our space, and our No Quit Tribe definitely has heard me mention that many times. So accountability is something that we often talk about with No Quit Living. And I was curious, what does accountability mean to you?
It's funny you say that. So if you ever get a chance, or in your listeners, go to YouTube and type in accountability and Nathan Jamail, you'll see the video where I talk about accountability. Here's why I say that. I believe accountability is the most selfless act a human being can do for another person. I also spend a lot of time telling leaders the number one reason that we don't hold people accountable is because we're selfish. And the point of that is, Chris, we have kids, and when I find someone with a teenager, a leader with a teenager, I say, isn't it funny that you would ground your 16-year-old child for doing some of the things your 30-year-old employees who you pay do, and you do nothing to the employee. Why? Do you hate your children or do you love your children? You love your children, and that's why you're willing to sacrifice the pain and the trouble of accountability. As leaders, we don't hold our people accountable because, good people are hard to find. God forbid if you're in the insurance business or whatever, or you're in a sales role and you got a roll of commission, something better than nothing. And then, or it's a lot of hard work. You have these tough conversations. It takes time and effort. And it's like, you know what? It's just not worth it. A bad body's better than a nobody. I think accountability is the most selfless act a leader can do. I think as an individual, I think if you can find someone to hold you accountable, you should beg them to hold you accountable. Most of the most successful people in the world have accountability partners, whether they pay a coach, they have someone they respect. But accountability, I don't think there's a person out there achieving greatness in this world that doesn't have some type of accountability system.
I'm so glad you touched on that. That's something that we often speak about and we often mention in some of our speakings and our training and coaching is the concept of an accountability partner. And I think it's often overlooked. And it could be discussed or it could be mentioned as something different as a mentor, as a coach. But the reality is if someone else holds you accountable and you're accountable to that person, your chance of succeeding or accomplishing that goal is so much higher than it is if you didn't have that person or that accountability partner. So I'm glad you touched on that. One of the things we often do on each show is we're always looking to improve and we're always looking to offer different recommendations for our listeners. I was curious, Nathan, if you have either a morning or a daily ritual that you swear by.
I do. So I do a couple of things in the morning, and I do it consistently every morning. And that is I listen to my music of choice. I listen to Christian rock channel on Amazon Music. That's my choice. And so in the morning when I'm getting ready, I'm jamming my tunes of my spiritual music. Or this morning I had the kids alone. I'm jamming my kids, troll soundtrack, something that makes me feel good and gets me spiritually open. It doesn't always have to be spiritual music. And then every single morning I listen to an audiobook while I'm driving. That's my thing. And so when I'm driving and listen to audiobook, and then I do it, typically if I do all that, if I'm trapped in it on the afternoon, I'll listen to my audiobook on the way home. But those are the two things I do every single morning. And I've had different variables when it comes to my morning routine. I've done morning goals, which I did every morning for a long time. And for me, the music and the audiobook has become a way for me to get spiritually stronger every day and mentally stronger every day. Helps you stay motivated. I listen to something, like this morning, Think and Grow Rich, man. It was talking about the alignment of our energy. And I'm like, you know what? I needed that today. So that's what I do every single morning. And if I'm going on stage, I do it a little extra before I go on stage.
That's interesting. Every single guest we've asked that question to has their own morning ritual, and I think it's really neat because although a lot of them are similar, there's a lot of differences. So I appreciate you sharing a little bit about what you do. So assuming the 20-year-old version of yourself would have listened, what's the one piece of advice you would have given to the 20-year-old Nathan?
Do we have another 6 hours?
5.5.
If I could go back to my 20-year-old Nathan and give advice, I would say read a lot more a lot sooner. I didn't become a learner until, goodness gracious, I was a director at Sprint, so that was 98. So I was 26, 27. I was really blessed in my professional career, but I took a lot of chances when I was young, but I wasn't a learner. And so if I could give my 20-year-old advice self, I would say get to learning faster and more often.
No, I like that. Now, to switch directions here, if you could have dinner with anybody, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
I would tell you, and I think I'm cheating on this, but I tell you, bring my children. And not because I can learn more from them and I don't get to have dinner with them every night, It's because I would never want my children to hear that if I have dinner with someone one time, that it wasn't them. So I don't know if that's the right answer, but I think that'd be my answer.
It's 100% the right answer because it's how you want to answer it. So I appreciate you being candid with that. And I think if you did have one dinner, it would be a great dinner to have it with your kids.
Yeah, and that's purely selfish because I wouldn't want them to say, "Daddy, I can't believe you didn't say yes," because they couldn't. Because I saw a video on this once where they asked all these adults, and they said, people said Jesus, and someone else said George Washington, and someone else said, President, and then they asked all the kids, and the kids said, "Mommy and Daddy." And I went, "How heartbreaking is that?" And since that video, I think I have to give you that answer.
No, it's a great answer, and it's honest, which is the best part. So I wanted to ask you, Nathan, in addition to your new coming book that's coming up, what else are you working on? Is there anything else exciting you'd like to share with our listeners?
I'm working on a couple of things. The new book's coming out, and that's coming out October 1st, Serve Up, Coach Down. We're working on a lot of PR work and articles that we're writing to kind of promote it. I'm still working on the Leadership Playbook, which came out in 2014, and I'm doing a lot of speeches with companies. And then lastly, I do a podcast that I'm working on with the wife. The wife has had her podcast out for a couple of years, and it's her and her friend called Happy Hour, and she's allowed me to join once a month. So just fine tuning content and getting this new book out. That's it.
No, you definitely have a lot on your plate, and that's pretty neat that your wife allows you to jump on once a month. So I wanted to switch lanes here into what we call our hot seat questions. And the only rule or requirement is that you just spit out the first thing that comes to mind.
That's very dangerous.
Yes,
but
that's
okay.
that's what most people that's what most people say, but we edit after, so it's not nearly as dangerous as it sounds.
All right, let's roll this thing.
So if you had one last meal and you can choose absolutely anything, what would you choose?
Crab. Alaskan king crab.
What is your all-time favorite smell?
My all-time favorite smell. The smell of a old outboard motor on a boat.
Favorite sport?
Favorite sport? Did you say favorite sport, Chris?
Yes, sir. Favorite sport. Sorry.
Oh, football. NFL, Texans, Houston Texans football. No doubt about it.
All right, you got my second question. That was my favorite team, so the Texans.
Yes. Super Bowl champions, 2019.
Oh, wow. That's a bold prediction.
Yeah, it is.
Favorite movie?
Favorite movie? I'm going to go with Wedding Crashers.
Ah, great flick. All-time favorite book?
All-time favorite book, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Do you have a favorite singer or band?
I'm going to go with my childhood because I'm not into music so much anymore. I tell you, if you asked me today, I'd say Mercy Me. But my all-time favorite band when I was a kid was Motley Crue.
And if you were in a foxhole and you could only choose one person to have your back, who would that be?
My wife.
Awesome. So before we wrap up, Nathan, I wanted to ask you if you could magically snap your fingers and accomplish anything exactly 1 year from now, what would it be?
To have the most successful speaking career I could have. If I could, that is my passion. It's what I love to do. I do it 50 times a year. If I could do that 100 times a year and just touch people's lives, that's it. And obviously have a happy and healthy family. But that'd be it. I truly do what I love, and I try to do it better every year.
That's important, and that goes back to your initial point before, which is always looking to grow and never staying complacent. So before we finish up, do you have any parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners?
Man, the only parting words I would leave with you is this, is that life is made to be lived in abundance, and the only thing that gets in our way is us. And we typically quit too soon because we're afraid, as I was telling my daughter, you can't be afraid of failing, and most importantly, you can't be afraid of failing in front of other people. And so my challenge to you is, I think your motto is no quit. Is no quit. Not for me, not for you, not for anyone. And that life is, we get everything we want out of it, and just find out what you want and don't quit. It's simple, but it's not easy. That's it.
No, I love it. And that's great advice. That makes a lot of sense. And then the last question is, for our listeners that would like to follow you or connect with you, what's the best way for them to find out more information about you?
Best way to find information about us is doing a couple of things. The first one is go to our website, www.nathanjamail.com. That's NATHANJAMAIL.com. We have our blogs, our article listings, our books, everything's on there, videos. Or please like us on Facebook. You know, I'm still that unpopular 12-year-old kid. I need to beg for friends. Like us on Facebook or LinkedIn. And again, Nathan Jamail, NATHANJAMAIL. And that's how you find us.
That's some great stuff. I truly appreciate you spending some time with us today. I know you're busy both speaking and finishing up your book as well as all the other stuff you do. So thank you very much for your time, and I definitely hope we can connect again soon.
Hey, listen, Chris, I appreciate you having me. Thanks, my friend, and keep living the dream and never quit, baby.
Thank you for listening to episode number 123. Nathan shared some really interesting advice with us in the concept of simple versus easy. I think we all know what we need to do and how to do it. That's the simple part. Actually taking that action and taking that first step and putting in the hard work, that's the challenging part. Nathan spoke about the importance of constantly learning, improving, and becoming a better version of yourself. His definition of success was both unique, but I believe spot on. He defined success as being grateful for what we have, but never content with where you are. Nathan also mentioned that the most successful people he knows have either accountability partners or a specific accountability system. That I could not agree with more. In his closing words, Nathan shared some spot-on advice that our No Quit tribe can never hear too often. Nathan said that in life, we are all meant to live in abundance, and that we all tend to quit too soon. He shared with us the importance of not being afraid to fail, and don't ever quit. Not for me, not for you, not for anyone. And find what you love and don't quit. So in closing, we have a couple of open-ended questions for our listeners. Are you living a life of abundance? Are you looking to always improve, learn, and become the best version of yourself? Do you have an accountability partner? And most importantly, do you hold yourself accountable? If the answer to these questions are not what you want them to be, that is okay. You can't go back to yesterday or last week, but you can start over today, right now, and go for your greatness. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.